Welcome to the New York Comic Con presentation of Batman Beyond, a fantastic series premiered 21 years ago, and we've got the legendary casting and dialogue director and two of our main cast with us today. I'm Gary Mariano, pleased to be with you, but that's not important now. We got to talk about the people who are here with us. She's directed the voices of your childhood and your adulthood. Some of your favorite shows of all time. Andrea Romano was deeply involved with 8 Emmy Awards, 30-something nominations, the Winsor McKay Award for Lifetime Achievement in Animation. Welcome, Andrea Romano.
Thank
Yay!
you.
You know him as Eric Matthews in Boy Meets World, as Ron Stoppable in Kim Possible, as Terry McGinnis in Batman Beyond. Will Friedle.
Yay! Thank you.
Okay, I did some extra research on this one because I get tired of introducing him so many times, but this is the guy that's played Bruce Wayne or Batman or both in 15 films, 12 series that span 260-something episodes, 15 shorts, 23 games, 1 live-action TV series episode, and that totals up to almost 120 hours of film as Batman. Kevin Conroy.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
All right, quick reminder, everyone on the panel will be doing one-on-one meet and greets after the panel. They also have autographs and personalized videos available. To purchase those things, you can go to findthemetaverse.com/guests and click on the buttons at the top of the page. I'm sure there's something here you can, like right here or something, I don't know. But you just find themetaverse.com/guests and go enjoy these people. So we're focused on Batman Beyond today, and in particular the actors, because look who we have before us. I just need to point out, through 52 episodes of this series, Andrea cast 202 different actors, and not just any actors. These people include 5 Oscar nominees, 47 Emmy Award winners out of 222 Emmy nominees, 5 Golden Globe winners, 4 Grammy Award winners, and 6 actors who have been enshrined on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. That's a pretty amazing roster. Right.
I love that you did that research and got those specifics. It's remarkable.
I spent a lot of time on IMDb.
Well done. That's so cool.
So let's talk about this cast, though, especially these two, because they're sitting here. You guys were just coming off Batman the Animated Series, hugely successful. There's always a call for change here or there. Was Kevin a lock for the new series? Did you guys consider any other one else?
No, he was a lock. I mean, we made him audition. We kind of put him through that exercise of let's just make sure of what I am absolutely positive you can do, but let's just, in case anybody in a position of authority who could have a say has a question about it, let's be sure we show them how well you can do this. And it was such a simple adjustment that Kevin made to make Bruce Wayne sound older. And the truth of it is, all of us, as we get older, our voices deepen. What happens is gravity affects all of our muscles, including our vocal cords. And so our voices get deeper. So a good part of this was just Kevin using, not forcing it, but using the lower part of his voice and then adding some breath to it. And Kevin, you certainly can contradict me if that's not the way we went about it, but I do believe that's what we did. We didn't want him to force it out there. We didn't want it cartoony, but even though Batman had a very deep bass bottom line, Bruce Wayne needed to be pitched slightly deeper. And I noticed, Will, too, that you make a slight adjustment from when you're playing Terry and when you're playing Batman in your voice. And it was only in my most recent research that I actually realized that, which is embarrassing some 21 years later. But so Kevin, what we did was we had Kevin read the copy. And I'm sure you're going to ask me about Will, and we'll talk about that in a second. But most important was to find out who would Kevin work well with in that remarkable role of young Batman and Terry McGinnis. And that's what was key. Was we knew we had Kevin. We knew Kevin was the one sort of touchstone, in the cast. That was this one person who really was there from the whole beginning of the Batman series. And then we were searching. Do you want me to just go into the Will Friedle thing? You want to ask me?
Why don't you talk about Will?
I'm going nuts. We searched and searched and searched. And for anything Batman related, it was important to get the casting right, really crucial. And so we had seen a lot of young actors that we knew from voiceover experience. And then Bruce Timm's wife, Marta, said, you guys should really take a look at this one guy who's on this series, Boy Meets World. It's not the main lead, it's the second lead, and he's really good. And I tend to like second leads. The leads, sometimes they're hard to get because their schedules are awful. I find that the second lead tends to be often a more substantial actor. It's almost like being a second kid. You have to kind of do something to get more attention over the older kid when you come in, And so Will came in and did an audition that was so good. And you prep an audition in your head as a director and you say, this is what I think it should sound like. And practically every beat that Will hit was exactly what I had thought it should sound like. But most importantly, we had Kevin and Will come in and work together. And that was almost like a party. That was such an enjoyable experience because they instantly had a rapport as just actors and people. And I can still remember, and I'm sure you guys can too, some of the dialogue from the scenes that we had them read together, including when Bruce Wayne agrees to have Terry work as his assistant. And Mom is there. And Mom doesn't know that Bruce Wayne was once Batman. And there's that wonderful scene, Kevin, you remember where you put your head on the cane and you say, do you agree, Terrence?
No.
And it was
Hello,
almost as if they had shot you, Kevin, for that particular scene, because it was exactly the way you acted the scene physically, and that's what the animation came to look like. But as soon as we had them both act together, we knew we were set with Batman and Terry and Bruce.
Hey, Will, what do you recall of that audition?
Well, the first thing I really recall is my agent at the time calling me and saying, would you have any interest in playing Batman? And I remember thinking to myself, is there an actor in the world that would hear that and go, no, not interested at all. Thanks for calling. I was a huge Batman the Animated Series fan. To me, that's still one of the greatest animated series of all time. I think it changed the entire dynamic of animation. I really do. I think it turned it from cartoons into an animated series. Very different thing. The acting was real. The writing was real. The animation was gorgeous. It was all done on black paper, so it was very dark. It was brilliant. So I was a huge fan of that. So I knew going in that it was big shoes to fill. I knew I was intimidated as hell going in. And so I went in and I read and I assumed that was going to be it. And I walked out, took a breath, and they called back. And when Andrea called me back, I think it was the second time was when I was with Kevin. The second or third time is when I was with Kevin. And then what I remember most was I got there first. And I'm already sitting in the booth waiting, but the door's open. And so I didn't see Kevin, I heard Kevin first. And so whenever you hear Kevin, he walked in and he was like, how's everybody doing? I was like, oh my God, it's Batman. He's in the other room right now. And he's coming in here. And anybody who knows Kevin, he's 4'11". He's
I beg your pardon.
He's a
Hey,
tiny
wait a
little
minute,
guy.
wait a minute.
He's not imposing at all. He's a big man. And he owns a room. He's an actor. He's a stage actor. So when he walks into a room, he owns the room. It's natural. And then when you add that voice to it, and there at the time, I'm 19, 20 years old. I'd never done voiceover in my life. And now I'm said, hi, it's nice to meet you. I'm Kevin Conroy. Hi, I'm Will Friedle. It was horrifying. I was so scared. And then Kevin instantly, that was the thing about the show. One of the reasons I think the show worked is because Kevin saw immediately that I knew that I had never done any voiceover. So our relationship, Kevin and Will at the time, completely mirrored Bruce Wayne and Terry in the mentor relationship. I mean, Kevin was teaching me how to sit in a chair the right way. As an on-camera actor, my instinct when someone talks to me is to turn away from the microphone to answer them. Well, you can't do that when the microphone's right in front of you. So it's little things like roll your shoulders back, open your diaphragm. I mean, Kevin really took me under his wing. So it certainly made it a lot easier. But for your first animated series, You've got Andrea
pressure.
directing, Kevin is Batman, Bruce Timm is writing, Glenn Murakami's producing, Paul Dini's. I mean, it was Oh, you've never done a film before? Now you're starring in a Steven Spielberg movie. So it was intimidating, but everybody made it really easy and a ton of fun. And it was, still one of the greatest experiences of my life.
Hey, Kev, what were your initial impressions of Will, and how did you see that relationship evolve?
Well, as Will was saying, I'm from the theater. I come from the theater, and as I entered the stage, you made me sound like this hammy New York actor. I mean, my God.
No, you're just
I'm kidding.
You
I'm
own it. You own the space.
I'm kidding.
You're a hammy New York actor.
No, my feeling was I was just so excited to be a part of this next iteration of the legacy, of the whole Batman legacy. And Will was there was such a spontaneity about him when he came in. There was such a presence about him in the room, and an honesty, and an openness. And he's that way as a person. And it just makes it so, he's so inviting. You want to work with him. You know what I mean? And acting, I always say to people, it's really more about reacting, because you're giving what you're getting. And I had been spoiled by Andrea after two series at that point of years of working with these amazing actors. I mean, Mark Hamill in the room opposite you, giving you what he gives you, you know? So it just would pull out these amazing performances for me. So Will, I could tell right away, was that type of actor, was a generous, open, in the moment actor. And you just wanted to work with him. Even though I wasn't going to be Batman anymore, it was something that I just had to get used to. I was so shocked when they said there was going to be a new Batman show, and they said, "Oh, little Hatch, you're not going to be Batman." I said, "What happened?" They said, "Well, he's going to be. You're too old now." I said, "Old?" I was like in my 40s, you know. But that's Hollywood. It's very cruel town. It's a very cruel town. No, it was wonderful meeting Will, and he hit it right on. And as he was saying, the relationship in the booth did somewhat mirror the characters' relationships, because like me, he came in with no animated voice experience. It was the first voice he'd done. It was the first voice I did, Batman. And there are certain tricks, like in the old days when I was a kid, we had paper scripts. And just the logistics of moving the page from page to page when you have microphones, and there were 8 or 9 microphones on in the room. So you have to be very careful of every noise in the room, because Andrea loves to get all the actors in there together. And that's how you get those wonderful performances that you get from Warner Brothers, is because we're all recording together. But when you have all those people in there, there's all those pages being turned in there. So there's just a logistics thing of turning the page, like picking it actually up, you know, getting the rivets out of your script and picking it actually up and moving it gently. So there were little things like that to pass on.
Things like overlapping. Well, you mentioned about trying to look, you know, off mic to act with the actor, but naturally we overlap. We interrupt each other. In animation, we can't do that for many reasons, but we may overlap it afterwards in production, but you guys can't overlap because it will mess up the mouth flaps and several other reasons why. But that's a natural temptation to jump in when someone says something. The line says,
because that's what you do on stage. That's what you do on stage. Exactly. I mean, that's what we're trained to do as actors, is to be involved, you know. Yeah. But and that's why when you started using more actors that were not animation people, because animation people know all this stuff. They know all the technique. But when you start bringing people from the theater and from film and television, other worlds, there's just a technical jargon that you have to get used to accommodate the microphone.
You guys
It's
were
very-
very generous about that to the guests. I thought both of you actors were very kind to the guests, and when they would turn their page really loudly on somebody else's line, you would explain to them
Well,
how to turn
that's something
their
I
page.
noticed Will picked up, which I learned early on, is that when you're Batman, you're the thread through the show.
Right.
You're the constant. And even though I was new to the game in 91, I was the only one who was going week to week.
Yeah.
And so it was when, like, you know, Melissa Gilbert would come in, or Ron Perlman, or someone who had never done this before. I felt a kind of like a responsibility to make them feel comfortable, to be the host, sort of, even though I wasn't.
Right.
You know, just to make them realize that this was a game, and anything goes. And I noticed that Will just innately realized the same thing, because he started doing the same thing to guests when it was his turn to be in the continuity chair, because he was the one who was the continuity through all the Batman Beyond shows.
I was
Simple
still that was,
kindness. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but it was also it's one of the things when you're doing any Andrea Romano show I've noticed is that one of the coolest moments is walking up before you get in to record, because you don't know who she's cast yet for that episode. And you never knew who was going to be in there. And you'd walk in and it would be the coolest people, like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. I can't believe I'm working with. And sometimes it is Mark Hamill. And, you know, you never knew who was going to be there. It was the most eclectic group of actors. It was people that I was thrilled to work with. And so that was one of my favorite parts, was parking my car and walking up the stairs, because I would be going, wonder who I get to meet today. Like, I wonder, it's that pilot. I walked in for the pilot and there's Michael Gross and Terry Garr. And it was like, come on, this is how we're starting.
I know.
It's like, this is the coolest thing in the world. So I mean, one of the best days I've ever had, I walked into the room and there was a tap on my shoulder and I turned around and it was John Ritter. And he just said, I want to thank you so much for inviting me onto your show. And it's marvelous. It was like, he's saying this to me? Like, are you kidding me? It's John Ritter saying this to me. And it was one of the best days of my career. So that was every week. It was every week. You didn't know who was going to be there. And Andrea's casting was and then of course they'd open their mouth and you go, well, they're perfect. Like, it's perfect casting, but you never knew who it was going to be. And that was so exciting for me to walk into that room and see Robert Patrick or Ron Perlman or, and that was the other thing is I've met so many actors. Will Wheaton and I talk about this all the time, about how so many actors that the first job they ever did was because Andrea cast them. And now voiceover is a massive part of their career. So we were at one convention, Wheaton and I, and we were pointing at people going, Andrea gave him career. Andrea gave her a career. Andrea where it was seriously, and I mean, we stopped at like 10 people. We looked at each other and went, well, we're voiceover actors because of Andrea. That person. So she was famous for that too, of jumpstarting careers where people would jump in and go, I want to do this. Like, this is amazing. And I want to make this a big part of my acting career.
The wonderful thing also about working with Andrea is that her background, I don't know if a lot of people know this, she comes from a theater background. She trained in the theater in SUNY, New York. And she has been a stage manager and she's been an agent. She's been so many different things in the business.
And an actor.
That she knows what actors are going through, not just in the recording studio and in a performance, but in their daily lives. So there's an incredible empathy. An incredible understanding of what actors go through. And she won't just give you the line reading, which is wonderful. She kind of guides you to it. She gives you the motivation for how you're going to get there. Because if you can find the line organically, it's always going to be better.
Way better.
Way
better. Absolutely. As I said before, you plan in your head what you think a scene should sound like. And then the trick is to leave that to the side and let you guys do whatever organically comes from you. And if it's different than what I heard when I prepped the script, I have to stop and think, is their version better? It is. It's valid. It works. It's organic. Let's use their version. And then sometimes I might get my version as well, just to have that where the producer wants to go. But that organic, and that was truly, you guys, as you know, why I enjoyed Ensemble Accord so much, because, I mean, we could do a two-line scene, and Will, you could read Kevin in one way for the first take, and then read him in a completely different way for the second take, and a third way completely different, and all would be valid and all very different. And that's why I liked how versatile you guys were. But I wanted to say one thing, because you brought up something really interesting. If I were to desire to have actors think of me in any one way of their experience with me, I would like to know that they thought I provided them with a space to be creative, to do this thing that they want to do, to be silly, to cut up and make jokes, to let Batman talk dirty, to do all that wonderful, which, I mean, sometimes something would happen where I'd be beating up somebody to get a line right. Say a guest that came in that just wasn't getting it right. And I would do it and get it and give them another chance and give them 2, 3, 4 takes. And then you kind of have to line read them after that because you just run out of time. But you want that. What would happen is that the room would start getting a little bit tense because the actor wasn't getting it. And every other actor was feeling the pain of not getting the line right. And then Will would make some ridiculous joke and everybody would laugh and the tension would break. And then the next take, we get the line right. And that's my point about providing that environment for everybody to feel like I can help this poor actor who's struggling with this line by just cutting the tension a little bit. And I never wanted tension, but that would happen. It was just a natural cause. But somebody I want to talk to real quickly, and Gary, I know you have a zillion questions, but one of the casting... You guys are answering
them all. Keep going.
Oh, good. One of the casting coups that I love was Henry Rollins. When I brought Henry Rollins in, we had a character named Mad Stan. And at the time, Henry was doing some spoken word concerts. It wasn't music concerts, it was spoken word. And he was standing up in front of an audience for an hour and a half, and just ranting about what he hated. It was kind of, podcast before podcast. It was way ahead of its time. And we had this Mad Stan guy who was railing against the world. And I thought, I think Henry can do it. And I think, Will, he might be one of those guys that I brought in and then had a voiceover career in animation because he got it. He just got it. And he's really kind of outside of our normal talent pool, you might say. And that I liked so much. I liked finding people who weren't in the group of 150 voice actors who make their living every day doing cartoon voices. These were people who maybe didn't have 3, 4, 5 voices they could do. They had one, but were really good. And so that was a joy to bring in some of those wonderful actors.
Well, I think it's also, as an actor, you can sense when you're director, and this is anywhere. This is on film, this is TV, this is animations, whatever. As an actor, you can sense if a director does not like actors. You get that feeling, and you can work with directors that you can tell actors aren't their favorite thing in the world. And that's one thing you get from Andrea is you just know she loves actors. So that, I mean, it matters. It matters to everybody's performance in the room when you know your director genuinely loves actors. I mean, Andrea, you and I were talking yesterday, and you were like, one of the things I hate about this pandemic, and I could never direct during this, is because the second you'd walk into a room, I'd want to grab you and kiss you for 5 minutes and say welcome. And you're like that with all actors. You like, that's why I love actors. So that comes through when you're recording. And that's one of the things that made working with everybody so great is you're sitting there with a bunch of actors that feel the love to use a ridiculous phrase, feel the love the project, love the idea that you're doing something in the Batman world. And then next thing you know, you get some of the episodes that we had. And
well, that was because everyone had gone through the Andrea Romano screening process. Because actors are people. There are generous actors and there are selfish actors.
Correct.
You know what I mean? There are kind actors and there are mean actors. They're people.
Yep. And they're actors who can't find the joy, and they got to find the joy.
But when you go into a booking, whether it was for Batman Beyond, Batman the Animated Series, Justice League, anything that Andrea has been involved with, people came in to play and to give. It was just a wonderful creative atmosphere. And like Andrea was saying, when the atmosphere is like that, it gets better performances out of people.
Yeah.
You know, it's self-defeating to not have that atmosphere.
Exactly.
I was just going to say, we had multiple episodes. I mean, multiple episodes where we would finish recording and at least one of the actors who had never done it before would make a quick speech about how I want to thank everybody for bringing me in. This was so much fun. I mean, that happened all the time.
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, it was, you don't see that in sitcom. You don't end an episode and then have one of the actors stand up and go, I just want to thank the director for bringing, that never happens.
Isn't that great though?
But
Isn't
it
that
would
great?
happen all the time within our recording sessions. It was incredible.
What happened too with Batman Beyond is it did become a little family because there were more episodes that the two of you were in, and then Cree Summer and Lauren Tom. There was quite an ensemble of people that would see each other almost every week as we did the shows. And so it gets to be its own little family. But what was so great about that group is that it wasn't a closed off family that made people feel like you're coming into our family and we're not going to embrace you. It was come join our family. We're going to have so much fun. And these wonderful, silly actors that came into play. I say silly because they had done nothing like this before. It had absolutely nothing to do with their history of what the work they had done. And if you remember, you guys, it was a very unusual kind of guest stars, as in the characters, the way they were drawn. They were very different than the Batman villains, the regular Batman the Animated Series villains. And we had those, remember the news reports that were crucial in the show of getting information. And we had two guys who did the majority of those. One was Sean Donnellan and the other was Mark Davis. And we asked them to be just kind of, everything is fine. 150 people killed today on the road. I mean, everything was so, but everything, the good news and the bad news all came out the same way. And that was really fun. Sean Donnellan, I knew because he was one of the first ever hosts of a Food Network show. He had something called How to Boil Water. And he was the non-cooking guy. And then there was a real chef and they taught them how to cut onions and do stuff. And that's where I found him, was on the Food Network. And so I liked finding people from all different walks of life, going to a play and seeing somebody, teaching a class and finding somebody, always wanting to meet Olivia Hussey and having her come in to play
Olivia
Talia,
Hussey.
you know,
Isn't that
and
great?
David Warner and all these. I mean, yeah, that was like totally selfish. They would be just plain actors. I'm like, I admire them. I love them. I know they can act. I've seen their work. I believe I can direct them and teach them the specifics they need to learn about voiceover acting. And then we got to work with these fantastic people and get to know them. And
We had a James Bond.
Terry Garr.
We had a James Bond.
George Lazenby, right?
George Lazenby.
George
Terry Garr.
Lazenby,
Yeah, we
yes.
had some, I mean, some of the people were, and then you went really random where it was like, then there's like Andy Dick. I mean, it was.
Oh, right. Absolutely. And he was absolutely right for the role.
Yeah, he was perfect. He was perfect. So you just never knew who you were going to be sitting next to. It was so great.
There was random, but then there was like a string of LA Law or Hill Street Blues or soap opera stars. Who were the fans of those folks that
can you tell what we were watching at the time?
Yeah, really.
I can tell you that the soap opera fan was Bruce Timm. And it's very sweet how that came about because Bruce and his mom, the time that they had together was them watching soap operas together. And so he knew all the General Hospital actors. He knew all, so that was Bruce Timm. Hill Street Blues, probably me. And, you know, Leslie Lambert was also a casting on this show. And so, and all the shows that we worked on together, none of us cast in a vacuum. It was groups of people. And even sometimes Will would say, hey, so-and-so from, you know, this series that I worked with is great fun and you might want to consider him for this show. Or Kevin would say, you know what, there's this great actor I worked with at Juilliard 20 years ago, and he, I think, would be really fun. And so I liked actors to feel free to mention other people who wanted to come and play. But the truth is, agents would call me after the initial Batman animated series came out, and they would say, I'm going to give you a list of 20 celebrities who want to come and play on Batman because, you know, Joe Schmo came back from an episode and talked about how fantastic it was. And I know all these guys cannot sit with their kids and watch their episode of Hill Street Blues because it's too violent and there's too many guns and all that kind of stuff. But if I'm on a Batman episode, we can watch it together and I will be the hero of the household. And that, I'm sure, happened to you guys a couple of times too, where people said, suddenly my kids respected me.
Oh, yeah.
I did a Batman episode, or I did.
Well, I hear that now a lot when at Comic-Cons. Is I get a lot of people who watched it with their parents growing up. You know, it was the one show they could watch together.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It was awesome. It was great.
So I'm glad you mentioned Lauren Tom and Cree Summer. This show kind of went colorblind casting early and had characters that featured that along the way. it's such a prominent point of contention these days. What was the thinking back then?
I am so glad you asked about that, because I read something in the paper the other day where some actress was stepping down from her role, and she's Caucasian because she was playing a young black boy character or whatever. And I remember thinking, why did anybody let that get through at all? It's always been my thought, even before the Screen Actors Guild made any kind of statement about it, that if a character with more than the word hey or what the, if they're depicted as a certain ethnic background, that is the ethnic background that should be cast to voice that role, unless you do an enormous search and can't find an Asian actor to cover that role perfectly. But these two roles specifically that you mentioned for Cree and Lauren were easy. Those were two already established voiceover actresses who were truly talented and really versatile. And but the Screen Actors Guild, Gary, after every single episode of every cartoon I ever cast or directed, I have to fill out a cast report which says if the actors are over 40 or under 40, male or female, and what their ethnicity is, to make sure I wasn't only, or anybody was only hiring white 40-year-old men. So that for me was really easy. Now, every once in a while, that said, every once in a while, a character would show up, and you guys can speak to this too, where we're doing a bunch of action and all this happens, and suddenly there's some clerk that runs out of the store, and he's clearly black. And when we recorded it, there was no evidence of what that character was going to be. It just said clerk. Could have been female, could have been male. We just made a decision. So I threw it to Will and said, Will, you say, stop him, in another voice other than Terry McGinnis' voice, and he would do that. Or Kevin, in another voice other than Bruce Wayne, just say, stop him. And then the footage comes back, and it's this, 17-year-old looking black guy. And you go, I got to fix that if I can. And so then we would. But sometimes it was crazy to actually pay, what were we paying at the time? Like $900 a session to hire a young black 17-year-old boy to come in and say, hey, that's cost prohibitive. But the Screen Actors Guild wanted us to make sure that we were at least trying. And then you had to actually supply documentation to say, okay, here's my SAG sign-in sheet. Here's all the people I read for those roles. And you can see that after 5 days of 4 hours of auditions every day, we could not find anybody. It's like Samurai Jack, right? Phil Lamar plays Samurai Jack, not an Asian character. It came down to the point of if they could not use Phil Lamar, who was the only guy who could do the voice the way they wanted it, and he's a black actor, if they didn't allow him to use it, they would have stopped production on the show. And that doesn't serve anybody's purpose to stop production. So for me, it was always very clear. If the character's black, you hire a black actor. If the character is Asian, you hire or do your best to try.
I'm going to turn away from casting for a minute.
Okay.
And talk about the actual series. Will, you had the chance to create a character with no previous incarnations. What was that like for you? And conversely, what was it like for you, Kevin, to morph this character you knew so well into just an older version of Bruce Wayne?
Well, for me, it was, I think, far easier because I didn't have to step into Bruce Wayne's shoes in any way, shape, or form. I wasn't, I can still look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, Friedle, you're the best Terry McGinnis there's ever been. Because it's one of those things where I just didn't, it was me. I got to, we all kind of sat around and we created the character. And I remember Andrea mentioned at the beginning, talking about the kind of, differentiating between the Terry McGinnis voice and the Batman voice. And there were times where Bruce especially would pull me back. Like, okay, that's too deep, too gravelly. But what we talked about was the idea that Terry knew he was 17, obviously. So you go to stop a bad guy and you've got a high school voice. Hey, stop. Nobody's going to be scared. But if you drop the voice, you gravel it. So I got to kind of create all that stuff with the help of everybody, obviously, but we got to really work on the character. But I was allowed to fumble through it, much like being, my first show ever and learning the process as I'm going. That worked perfectly for the character because that's exactly what Terry was doing. So I think in the long run, it was a heck of a lot easier for me because, again, I wasn't. I mean, again, there's a lot of wonderful actors out there that have voiced Bruce Wayne. I always hear Kevin. Kevin is my Bruce Wayne. So everybody else is kind of not Kevin. I mean, and again, I'm certainly not insulting them because there's some fabulous actors that have done it, but that's how I grew up, and my Batman is Kevin.
Yes,
so
the brainwashing worked.
It's true. It's true. I didn't have to. So it was a heck of a lot easier for me than somebody once again having to be a Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was, as Andrea said, they actually had me read for the role because Bruce Wayne at that point is 80, right, and he physically can't do it anymore. And that's the whole genesis of the show. The whole reason it exists is because he needs a new recruit to do the stuff that he can't do. That first episode when he goes to shoot a gun, and that moment when he realizes he's crossing that line, that he's relying on a gun because his own physical strength isn't enough anymore, and he realizes he can't do it anymore. So this guy had to be in his 80s. And I was 40-ish. I was 40, I'm starting to think, I was 45. And so it was a jump. And so they had me audition. And as Andrea was saying, it wasn't so much the register of the voice, because it was very much they very much went into that sort of Batman range for my voice. He was old and he was scarce. But what it was for me was, it was more the weight of life. The weight of life. Terry, get off my lawn. You know, it wasn't just the depth of the voice. It was the pace of the character.
Yeah.
You know,
and you know what else, Kevin, is you would physically sit at the microphone differently or stand at the microphone differently when you were voicing older Bruce Wayne than if you were doing Batman. Of course, because it actually helps to make Bruce Wayne's voice sound older, to hunch over a little bit, so he doesn't have that nice diaphragm, strength. You want it to be weaker. And, it's as much as your ability to manipulate your voice, it was really a lot about the acting. What is it like to be 80 and to realize that you can no longer do this? And so there was a bitterness that Bruce Wayne had about that too. He was not pleased about the fact that he couldn't do it anymore. And so he would take it out on Terry. And he would give Terry a really hard time, and he would freeze his bat suit every once in a while. Remember, he'd hold it so you couldn't move.
Well, that's why in Return of the Joker, I think he makes Terry
give it back,
give back the bat suit, and he makes him sort of earn the role, right? And he does in the course of that movie. But Bruce is clearly uncomfortable turning over that mantle.
Right, you bet.
Okay, can we talk about Return of the Joker for 2 seconds? Because that was so
right
good.
where we were going next. Take it away.
Amazing movie.
A few times in an actor's career where a project or even a day or two of work always stand out. And I think we recorded for a week, 10 days for the movie?
Yeah, it was a long record. It was.
And I, for that time, was sitting smack dab in between Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. And I'll never forget. I mean, my first reaction, no joke, we'd already done, first of all, any actor worth their salt will tell you that even if you're 7 years into a series, you're pretty sure you're going to get fired every day. So Batman Beyond was no different. We were already done with the third series, or halfway through it, the third season. We were doing the movie, and I was still convinced they were going to replace me. So especially sitting in between Kevin and Mark, I was literally saying to myself at times, just keep your mouth shut so they don't know you don't belong here.
Oh.
Because you're in between the two of them together, though. I mean, first of all, two diametrically opposed actors where Mark is an inch from the microphone looking like he's going to eat the entire microphone. And then there's Kevin kind of slouched at the microphone doing 80-year-old Batman. And me in between, I didn't need to say a line. I didn't need to have anything done in the film. If I was just allowed to sit there and watch for a week, and it was unfreaking believable. So that, to me, is one of the greatest moments in all of Batman Beyond, was just sitting in between those two. Because I was the buffer between both of them as they were going at it, and it was so cool.
We actually spent a lot of time thinking about who to sit next to whom for various different things. And so those things were not random. Those actually were thought out as to how will
That's
this
awesome.
best
That's interesting.
serve.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting.
How, do we want to put this guy straight across from this actor so that they can act to each other face to face, or do we want that proximity? Do we want it to be a little uncomfortable? And for that particular thing, it worked. But there was something I wanted to mention about that film, and I loved that film. I really did, and people still talk about it, and it's so strange and bizarre. And if someone says, "Can you tell me the plot of that film?" It's like, do you have 20 minutes? Because it goes
it's
on.
insane.
It's so convoluted.
It goes on and on.
It really does.
It's an amazing
and
story.
as you research it again, you realize how difficult it was and how I needed someone like Bruce Timm to keep me. Okay, where are we in the story now? Okay, where do we have to get to? Okay. But we had a wonderful young actor. I'm going to forget his name now, and I looked it up and I forget. Gary, do you have it? The young actor who played young Robin?
I don't have any.
He was when we decided that Robin was going to be Hispanic, we recast him. I can't think of his name right now. And he was terrific. He did several episodes on the show, as well as when the movie came around, he was the young Robin. And he did a very good job of the acting. And we had fulfilled that requirement that Robin be played by a Hispanic actor because he was being depicted as Hispanic. And there was one scene that was so incredibly difficult in that film. It would be for anybody who was, an actor for a million years. And it was when young Robin is being told he's under the Joker's control, and he is being told to shoot Batman. He's supposed to kill Batman. And the kid starts laughing, hysterical, kind of a Joker laugh, because he's under Joker's laugh, shoots. Who does he shoot? The Joker. And then he realizes what's been going on. The power is no longer taking over his brain, and he bursts into tears. Now, Bruce made it really clear he wanted it to be one solid cue that goes from hysterical laughing, Joker laughing, to weeping. Well, tell me what 12-year-old kid can pull that off. And the kid, I worked with him for a really long time, and it was clear he was not going to be able to do it. So we do this thing for the audience who doesn't know this. We do this thing called either dummying lines or scratching lines. It's when the line is done by somebody who is not going to ultimately be the voice. And Bruce said, just for timing, Andrea, so the animators can move forward, would you do that cue? Sure. So I go into the booth, stand behind the microphone, and I start with the insane, you always start a good laugh with a good deep inhale. And laughing on cue is really difficult, and crying on cue is really difficult. And being 12 years old and doing that whole thing together is really difficult. So I got up and did it, and it's, this goes on for like 30 seconds. To a cry, ends up as a weeping. And you have to be careful because crying often sounds like laughing. Laughing often sounds like crying. So we got it, and I had the timing. The film comes back some 8 months later, and we're ADRing, and we get to, oh man, we got to find a kid to come in and cover that. And Bruce Timm said, no, we're going to leave your voice in. And I never, ever, as a director, as a voice director, as a casting director, I never would have approved that. I always would have taken my voice out. But I am credited in the film as crying boy. And it's my voice in that, which is just, it's so strange and weird, but it was just a difficult moment for a 12-year-old kid to accomplish that kind of acting, beat.
That 12-year-old kid was Matthew Valencia.
Thank you. That's him, Matthew
go.
Valencia. He was terrific. He was very good. It's just, that's really hard. Really hard.
All right. We have 2 minutes for you three to tell me. Batman's been around for 81 years. He is one of the most recognizable characters across the globe, beloved. What are your personal feelings about having made such a significant contribution to that legacy?
Couldn't
Can I
be
ask
more
you really
proud.
quickly, am I on camera?
Yes,
You can see me.
I
I
can.
can see you.
Okay.
You don't see you?
No, I don't see me.
I see you.
Okay.
You got 2 minutes.
You look great.
Okay, no, I wasn't sure if I
I
had
know,
been
we're
off
losing time.
camera this whole time. I wasn't
I'm
sure.
so sorry. I'm incredibly proud to have been a part of it. I'm specifically proud because I'm a woman, and I like to think that I added some sort of female viewpoint to this quite masculine world of the DC universe in general, but Batman specifically. My 2 cents.
Kevin should end this one, so I will jump in real quick. It's a huge honor. I mean, obviously an immense honor, but it's also these two people have contributed far more than I did to the Batman world. I'm very proud to have my one little slice of it, and I will take that and be just humbled to even have had the opportunity. So yeah, it's big for me.
Kevin, 30 seconds.
Oh my God. Anytime an actor can be a part of something that affects so many people and touches so many lives, it just is such an honor, and it gives your career so much meaning. I hear from so many people who had difficult childhoods or difficult home lives that Batman was a safe place for them. Batman was a motivation to do good in the world. He's such a motivating character because of all the superheroes, he's not a superhero. He doesn't have any superpowers. He's the only one who's a human being. And he does it all through force of his will. And his will is so extraordinary. And that's what he means to so many people. And especially during this time of pandemic and crisis right now, I get so many requests from people for, a pep talk, motivation, because Batman means so much to people.
Excellent. I want to thank everybody at home for watching. I want to thank Andrea Romano, Kevin Conroy, and Will Friedle. And a quick reminder, they're doing one-on-one meet and greets after the panel. You want to purchase anything, go to findthemetaverse.com/guests. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.